I never thought my marriage would end like this. I never imagined I'd be sitting here staring at my wife, my Emily, slumped over the kitchen table, eyes swollen from crying, her lips trembling as she tried to form words she had no strength to say. I never thought I'd hear her whisper that she had cheated on me, that everything, the panic attacks, the distance, the way she flinched when I touched her, was because of this. And I sure as hell never thought the next words out of her mouth would be a name. Mia. I felt my stomach drop. My mind refused to process what I had just heard. Mia, my sister, the person I had grown up with, the person I had protected my whole life, the one person I had trusted blindly. Emily sobbed, her whole body shaking. I could barely move. My arms felt numb, my chest hollow. It felt like the walls around me were warping, like the ground beneath me was cracking open. But maybe I should have seen this coming. Looking back, there had been signs. Emily had always been warm, affectionate. She used to pull me into hugs that lingered, the kind that made you feel wanted. But then something changed. She started pulling away. At first it was subtle, a missed kiss before bed, a delay before responding when I told her I loved her. I would reach for her, and she would flinch, just for a second, before composing herself, as if realizing her reaction was unnatural. I asked her about it once, late at night, when she had turned away from me in bed. She sighed, mumbled something about being tired, about stress at work, about how she just wasn't feeling like herself lately. And then the panic attacks started. The first one happened at 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of her gasping for air, her hands clutching at the sheets, her body shaking so violently I thought she was having a seizure. I had never seen her like that. I tried to hold her, to calm her down, but she pushed me away, her breathing ragged, her eyes unfocused. "I can't," she kept whispering, voice breaking. "I can't breathe. I stayed up with her the whole night, stroking her back, whispering to her, telling her she was safe. I told her we'd figure this out together. She started seeing a therapist. At first, I thought it was helping, but then the attacks got worse. She would wake up drenched in sweat, shaking so hard she couldn't even speak. And the worst part? I couldn't help her. I could hold her, but I couldn't fix whatever was eating her alive. And then there was Mia. Emily and Mia had always been close. I used to joke that my wife and my sister were basically best friends, inseparable. They'd text constantly, go on coffee runs, have long wine nights while I sat in the living room watching TV, listening to their laughter spill through the walls. But then, it stopped. Mia started avoiding Emily. She wouldn't come over, wouldn't answer her calls. At first I assumed they had fought. I didn't push, thinking they'd sort it out on their own. But then one night, Emily sat curled up on the couch, staring at her phone with a look that made my stomach twist. "What happened between you and Mia?" I asked. She stiffened. "Nothing. You haven't spoken in weeks. Did you fight?" There was a hesitation, just long enough for me to notice. "It's complicated," she muttered, and then got up and walked away. That was the moment I knew. Something had happened. Something big enough to break them apart. A month later, I had to leave town for work. Emily was getting worse. Her anxiety had reached a peak, and I didn't feel right leaving her alone. So I made arrangements. I took the kids to my parents' house so she could have some time to herself, told her I'd only be gone for the weekend. Her best friend Claire was supposed to check in on her. I kissed her goodbye at the door, told her I loved her. She kissed me back. "I love you too," she whispered. I believed her. I shouldn't have. When I came home Sunday night, the house was dark. It was quiet, too quiet. My gut clenched as I stepped inside, my keys jingling in the silence. Something felt wrong. And then I saw her. She was slumped over the kitchen table, an empty bottle of wine next to her. Her hair was messy, her eyes puffy, her face pale. It was like she had been crying for hours. "Em?" My voice came out hoarse. She didn't move. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "What's going on?" I asked, softer this time. She looked up at me, and when our eyes met, I knew this was it. "I need to tell you something," she slurred, voice thick with alcohol and guilt. My pulse roared in my ears. This whole time, my panic attacks, everything. Her lower lip trembled. "It's because I cheated on you." My world tilted. The air was sucked from the room. My throat closed up. What? I barely recognized my own voice. Emily sobbed, gripping the edge of the table like she was afraid she might collapse. "I didn't mean to," she choked out. Then she crossed her arms. "Look, I don't expect you to understand, but it wasn't—" "Don't." My voice was low, deadly. "Don't you dare try to justify this." She swallowed, looking away. "I'm not. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't like we planned it. It just happened." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "That's not an explanation, Mia." She let out a breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I know." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then finally, she spoke again. "She's falling apart. You know." I blinked. "What?" Mia looked away, guilt written all over her face. "Emily, she's barely keeping it together." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, no shit." Mia shifted uncomfortably. "I told her not to tell you. Not because I wanted to protect myself, but because I knew this would destroy her. She's not okay. She hasn't been okay since the moment it happened." I felt a sharp twist in my chest. I hated her for saying that. I hated that part of me cared. "She deserves to suffer," I muttered, but the words felt hollow. Mia sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. "Maybe. But you loved her, right?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "I don't know. It was the truth. I had loved Emily. Maybe I still did. But now everything felt tainted. Everything we had built, everything we had shared, it had all crumbled in a matter of seconds. And worst of all, I had no idea what came next. That night, I found myself parked outside my own house. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to face this. But at the same time, I couldn't stay away. Through the living room window, I could see Emily sitting on the couch, curled up in one of my hoodies. Her hair was a mess, her face buried in her hands. She looked small, defeated. I hated her. I loved her. I didn't know which feeling was stronger. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the house that didn't feel like home anymore. I thought about our kids, about what they would think of all this one day. I thought about Mia's words. "She's barely keeping it together." I thought about the moment Emily had whispered Mia's name, and how something inside me had broken beyond repair. I thought about how easy it would be to walk inside, to pretend this was something we could fix. But could we? Did I even want to? I didn't know. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea what to do. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the front door of my house. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. A place where something unfixable had happened. Emily was inside. I could see her silhouette through the dimly lit living room window. She was curled up on the couch, hugging her knees to her chest, still wearing my hoodie. I should have left. I should have driven away and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I got out of the car, my legs heavy, my chest tight, and walked up the steps. When I opened the door, she flinched. Her eyes were red, her face pale, her body stiff like she was bracing for impact. "I didn't think you'd come back," she whispered. Neither did I. I closed the door behind me, the weight of everything pressing down on my shoulders. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, I walked past her into the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and grabbed a glass. My hands were shaking as I filled it with water. Emily didn't move. She didn't speak. She just watched me. The silence stretched between us, thick, unbearable. Finally, I set the glass down, turned around, and looked at the woman I had spent the last 10 years of my life with. The woman who had carried my children. The woman who had vowed to love me, to be mine, and only mine. And yet, here we were. "I don't know what you want me to say," she said softly. I let out a sharp laugh. "You don't know?" I shook, my head running a hand over my face. "You cheated on me, Emily. With my sister. What the hell am I supposed to do with that?" She winced like the words physically hurt her. "I don't expect you to do anything. I needed to tell you the truth." "Oh, that's rich," I snapped. "You needed to tell me the truth? After how long? After weeks of letting me think you were just, what? Depressed? Stressed? Dying inside for no reason?" She bit her lip, staring at the floor. I was dying inside. I let out another bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, congratulations. Now we both are." She wiped her face with her sleeve, inhaling sharply like she was trying to keep herself together. "I never wanted this to happen." "Yeah?" I stepped closer. "Then why did it?" Emily opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I shook my head. "Answer me, Em. Why?" Tears welled up in her eyes again. "I don't know." I exhaled sharply, turning away, gripping the edge of the counter. My knuckles were white, my whole body tense. "That's not good enough," I said through clenched teeth. "I know. I was drunk. I was confused. It only lasted 2 weeks, but it ruined everything. I ruined everything." My chest felt like it was caving in. My mind was scrambling to keep up. "Who?" My voice was hollow. She squeezed her eyes shut, as if saying the name out loud might kill her, and then she whispered it. "Mia." The world shattered. I heard myself laugh. A dry, humorless sound, like I had lost my mind. "You're joking," I said, but I knew she wasn't. She wasn't. Tears streamed down her face. Her whole body was shaking now. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I swear, I took a step back. My legs felt weak. The kitchen walls blurred around me. "You slept with my sister?" I whispered. Emily let out a choked sob. I didn't mean to," she said again, like that changed anything. A hollow, empty silence filled the room. My own wife. My own sister. And suddenly, I understood everything. The panic attacks. The way Emily flinched when I touched her. The way Mia had avoided her like a disease. They had both known this secret would destroy me. And now, it had. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My own sister. My own wife. Emily was still crying, her body trembling as she covered her face with her hands. I could hear her whispering something between sobs, but the blood pounding in my ears drowned out everything else. I needed to get out. The walls of our kitchen were closing in, suffocating me. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was inhaling smoke. My legs carried me backward before I even realized I was moving. "Wait!" Emily choked out. "Please, just—" I turned and walked away. I didn't slam the door, didn't say a word, I just left. Outside, the night air was cold against my burning skin. My hands were shaking as I pulled my phone from my pocket. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over my sister's name. Mia. I wanted to call her. No, I wanted to scream at her, demand, to know what the hell she was thinking. But what would I even say? What words could possibly make sense of this? Instead, I got in my car. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in that house. Not with her. Not after this. I don't remember driving to my parents' house, but that's where I ended up. The house was dark except for the porch light. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, punch something, but I couldn't even process what had happened, let alone react to it. My sister. The thought alone made my stomach turn. I finally forced myself out of the car. My parents were asleep, but I wasn't here for them. I needed to see my kids. I needed to remind myself that something in my life was still real. I stepped into the guest room where my son and daughter were curled up under their blankets, breathing softly in their sleep. The sight of them nearly broke me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and ran a hand over my son's hair. He stirred but didn't wake. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. How the hell was I supposed to explain this to them? Would I even tell them? Would they grow up never knowing why their parents' marriage fell apart? The weight of it all pressed down on me, crushing my ribs, stealing the air from my lungs. I had to pull myself together. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch in my parents' living room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Every conversation. Every moment that suddenly felt like a lie. Had Mia and Emily been hiding this from me the whole time? Had there been something before those 2 weeks? I thought about every time Emily had pulled away from me, every time Mia had gotten weirdly defensive when I asked about her personal life. How the hell had I missed this? By the time the sun came up, my exhaustion had settled into something colder, something sharper. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. I drove to Mia's apartment without thinking twice. I barely remembered getting out of the car, barely registered the way my hand trembled when I knocked on her door. The second she opened it and saw me standing there, her face went pale. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, gripping the edge of the door like she was preparing for an impact. Then, finally, I guess you know. The words sent a fresh wave of anger through me. I shoved past her into the apartment, my chest tight. She didn't try to stop me. When were you planning to tell me? My voice came out rough, unfamiliar. Mia exhaled shakily, rubbing a hand over her face. I wasn't. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course you weren't. She turned to face me, her jaw tight. It wasn't supposed to happen. Bullshit. It wasn't, she snapped. Do you really think I wanted this? That I wanted to hurt you? I stared at her, my hands curling into fists. You did hurt me, both of you. Mia's expression cracked for a second, just long enough for guilt to slip through. The sound of her voice, so small, so full of guilt, sent something sharp through my chest. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hate them both, but I couldn't, because deep down, part of me still loved her, and I hated myself for it. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. My back ached. My head was pounding, and for a moment, just a brief, blissful moment, I forgot everything. Then it all came rushing back. Emily, Mia, the betrayal, the way my world had crumbled in a matter of seconds. I sat up slowly, rubbing my temples. The house was quiet, too quiet. I found Emily in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She looked up when she heard me. You stayed. I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. Guess I did. She swallowed, looking down. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew that. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, I spoke. Was it just physical? Emily flinched. I already knew the answer before she even said it. No. I clenched my jaw. So, what? You were in love with her? No. She let out a shaky breath. But I think I wanted to be. Her words knocked the air out of my lungs. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my fingers went numb. I didn't feel like myself, she continued, voice thick with emotion. I felt like I was drowning, like I was trapped in this life that I didn't recognize anymore. And then Mia was there, and it was new, and it was wrong, but She choked on her words. I thought it would make me feel something again. I squeezed my eyes shut. And did it? Emily let out a broken laugh. No, it made me feel worse. I opened my eyes, turning to face her. Then why didn't you stop? She wiped her face with her sleeve. Because by the time I realized how much I hated myself for it, it was too late. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my hands trembling. I hated her for what she did. I hated her for what she took from me, but most of all, I hated that I understood, because I had felt trapped too. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not enough to do what she did, but enough to know that sometimes, even when you love someone, you can still feel lost. And maybe that was the worst part of all. That night, Mia called. I let it ring. Then I let it ring again. Then I turned off my phone. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. I wasn't ready to face her. Emily sat across from me at the dinner table, picking at her food. We ate in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us like a thick fog. Finally, she whispered, "Are you going to leave?" I looked up at her. I didn't have an answer. I should have said yes. I wanted to say yes. But instead, I just stared at her, my chest tight, my mind racing. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. I didn't know if I could ever look at my sister again. I didn't know if I could ever be the same man I was before, and, most of all, I didn't know if I even wanted to try. I spent the next few days drifting between reality and something else, something quieter. Numb. The kind of silence that stretches into your bones and settles there, making it hard to breathe. Emily tried to talk to me, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. The kids came home from my parents' house, and for the first time, I saw what it looked like to pretend. I smiled when I needed to. I answered questions about work. I tucked them into bed like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Emily played her part, too. She moved carefully around me, never pushing too hard, never asking for more than I could give. She was trying to be patient, but I could see it in her eyes. She was waiting for the moment. I would decide, would I stay? Would I leave? Would I do what she was too much of a coward to do and make the decision for both of us? I didn't know. And then I saw Mia. She showed up at my door late one night looking wrecked. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired. She looked just as hollow as I felt. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I should have said no. I should have slammed the door in her face. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. Mia hesitated, then walked past me into the living room. She stood there for a moment, arms wrapped around herself like she was freezing, even though the house was warm. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. "Try the beginning." She exhaled, shakily, running a hand through her hair. "It was a mistake." "No shit." She flinched, but she didn't argue. I let the silence stretch, waiting for her to continue. Finally, she said, "I was drunk." She was drunk. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That excuse is getting old. Mia clenched her jaw, looking away. "I know. I don't have a better one." I swallowed hard. "Did you love her?" Her head snapped up. "What?" "Emily. Did you love her?" Mia shook her head quickly. "No, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" She let out a hollow laugh. "I wish I knew." I watched her carefully, looking for something, anything, that would make this make sense. But all I saw was regret. And regret wasn't enough. "You could have told me," I said quietly. "Instead, you let me walk around like an idiot while you both carried this secret." Mia's shoulders sagged. "I was scared," I scoffed. "Of what? Me?" She hesitated. Then, "Of losing you." That made me pause. Mia looked at me, eyes full of something raw. "You're my brother," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose you, but I knew I would. And I was right." I clenched my jaw, looking away. I didn't know if she was right, because the truth was, I wanted to cut her out of my life. I wanted to erase both of them, to forget this ever happened, to move on like they never existed. But I couldn't, because no matter how much I hated them for what they did, I couldn't erase the past. I couldn't erase my own blood. The next morning, Emily found me sitting in the kitchen, staring at my untouched coffee. She hesitated in the doorway. "Mia was here last night." I didn't look at her. Yeah, she swallowed. Are you okay? I let out a soft laugh. No. She exhaled slowly, then walked closer. Did you get the answers you wanted? No. I finally looked at her, meeting her tired eyes. But I got the ones I expected. She nodded as if she understood. Exactly what I meant. Another silence stretched between us. Then finally, she whispered, Do you hate me? I didn't answer right away. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Did I hate her? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the truth was, I didn't. I hated what she did. I hated that she had taken something from me that I could never get back. I hated that she made me doubt everything we had ever built together. But I didn't hate her, and maybe that was worse. Emily waited for my answer, but I didn't have one. So instead I said, I don't know. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. That's fair. She turned to leave, but before she reached the doorway, I spoke again. What do you want me to do, Emily? She froze. I saw her shoulders tense. I saw the way her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Finally, she turned back around, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. I don't know. I let out a breath, shaking my head. That makes two of us. That night, I packed a bag, not because I had decided to leave, not because I had decided to stay, but because I needed space. Emily stood in the hallway as I zipped up the duffel, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. You're leaving, she said softly. For now. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. Do you think you'll come back? I didn't know how to answer that. I met her eyes, searching for something, anything, that would tell me what the right choice was. But there was no right choice, only pain, only uncertainty, only the mess we had made of our lives. So instead of answering, I grabbed my bag, stepped past her, and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what would happen next. And maybe, just maybe, that was the worst part of all.